My son David said Lily was at a friend's house, but her school called me this morning. She hadn't shown up for 3 days. I stood in his quiet kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator too loud. He'd left for work, and I had, until he returned at 6, to find answers. My hands trembled as I pulled open the basement door. The stairs creaked under my weight. Down in the dim light, I saw cardboard boxes stacked against the wall. I needed to check Lily's old things, the ones David said he'd donated. My heart beat fast. If he caught me, he'd never let me see my granddaughter again. I opened the first box. Toys, books, nothing unusual. Then I lifted a small wooden chest. Inside, I found Lily's favourite pink sweater, the one I'd knitted for her 7th birthday. It was stained dark red, and the smell of iron filled my nose. My breath caught. This wasn't from a fall or a scrape. I heard the floorboards groan above me. David was home early. I shoved the sweater into my bag and slipped behind the water heater. David's footsteps thudded down the stairs. He muttered into his phone, "She's getting too close. We need to move it tonight." My legs ached from crouching. I had to get out and call the police, but my phone was upstairs. David rummaged through the boxes, his shadow looming on the concrete wall. If he found me here, he might lock me away somewhere. He'd threatened before when I asked too many questions. Suddenly, his phone rang, and he hurried back up, leaving the basement door open. I crept to the stairs, but then I noticed a loose floorboard near where he'd been standing. I pried it up and found a small key taped underneath. It felt cold in my palm. As I reached the top step, I saw David standing in the hallway, staring right at me. David's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing down there, Mum?" I forced a smile and clutched my bag tighter. "Just looking for some old photo albums." He didn't believe me. I could see it in his tense jaw. I needed to reach my car and drive to the police station with the sweater as evidence. But my keys were in my coat pocket by the front door. David stepped closer, blocking my path. "You shouldn't be snooping around. It's not good for your health." His words felt like a warning. I edged toward the living room, my hip brushing against a side table. Then I remembered the key in my pocket. What did it unlock? David's phone buzzed, and he turned away to answer it. I seized the moment to grab my coat and keys. As I slipped out the door, I heard him shout, "Don't you dare leave!" I started the car, but the engine sputtered and died. The fuel gauge was on empty. He must have siphoned the gas. I sat in the driver's seat, hands shaking. David was already on the porch watching me. I had to find another way to safety, maybe walk to Mrs. Gable's house next door. But my arthritis made walking painful, and David would catch me easily. I opened my bag and touched the bloody sweater. It was my only proof. Then I felt the key again. It looked like it fit a safe or a locker. Where would David hide something important? His garage came to mind, where he kept old files. I got out of the car, pretending to check the engine. David approached slowly. "Need a ride, Mum?" he said, too sweetly. I shook my head and started toward the garage, hoping he'd think I was giving up. He followed, his footsteps heavy behind me. Inside the garage, I spotted a metal lockbox on a high shelf. The key slid in perfectly. I lifted the lid and saw a stack of papers and a recent photo of Lily, looking scared, with a date scribbled on the back. Tomorrow's date. David's hand clamped down on my shoulder. I jerked away, the photo crumpling in my grip. "What have you done to her?" I demanded. David's face turned cold. "You're confused, Mom. You need rest." He reached for the box, but I held it tight. I had to get to a phone and show someone what I'd found. If he took this evidence, I might never see Lily again. He tried to gentle his voice. Let's go inside. I'll make some tea. But I saw the anger in his eyes. I backed toward the garage door, clutching the box. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. David hesitated, then went to answer it. I peeked through the window and saw a woman in a suit, a social worker, here for a scheduled visit David had forgotten. This was my chance. I slipped out the side entrance into the backyard, the box under my arm. But as I reached the gate, I found it chained shut. David had planned for this. I heard his voice from the house, calm and convincing, telling the social worker I'd been having memory lapses. I stood frozen in the backyard, the cold metal of the lockbox digging into my side. David's voice drifted from the house, smooth and concerned, telling the social worker about my supposed dementia. The chained gate loomed before me, a solid barrier to freedom. I had to get out now, before he convinced her I was a danger to myself. I needed to reach Mrs. Gable's house next door. She'd known me for 40 years and would believe me. But the fence was too high to climb with my bad knees, and the only other exit was through the front, where David and the woman stood. If I failed, I would be labelled incompetent, locked away where I couldn't help Lily. I heard David's footsteps approaching the back door. He was coming to check on me. Desperate, I spotted an old gardening trowel near the rose bushes. I wedged it between the chain links and pulled, my hands shaking. The chain held fast. Then, a child's voice called from over the fence. "Grandma? Are you okay?" It was Tommy, Mrs. Gable's grandson, playing in his yard. I whispered for him to get his grandmother, but as he ran off, David stepped into the backyard, his smile tight. "Mum, let's go inside. We have a guest." He reached for my arm, but I jerked away, clutching the box. Just then, Mrs. Gable appeared at the fence, her face worried. David's expression shifted to forced warmth. "Everything's fine, Helen," he called to her. But I saw the key still in my hand and remembered the photo in the box. I held it up for Mrs. Gable to see. Lily's frightened eyes staring out. David's hand clamped down on my wrist, and he leaned close. "Don't," he hissed. Mrs. Gable's eyes widened, and she turned away quickly, mumbling about checking her oven. David pulled me toward the house, his grip firm. As we reached the door, I noticed the social worker watching us from the window, her notepad in hand. David guided me into the living room, his hand still tight on my arm. The social worker, Miss Higgins, sat on the sofa, her posture professional but her eyes wary. I needed to show her the evidence in the lockbox, to make her see the truth about Lily. But David had taken the box from me and set it on the coffee table, claiming it contained old family documents. Speaking up now was risky. If Ms. Higgins believed David, she might recommend guardianship, stripping me of all rights. David offered me a seat, his voice dripping with false concern. "Mum has been forgetting things lately, even wandering off," he told Ms. Higgins. I stayed standing, my heart pounding. Ms. Higgins asked about Lily, and David smoothly said she was at a boarding school for gifted children, a last-minute opportunity. I knew that was a lie. Lily hated being away from home. Pressure built in my chest as David handed Ms. Higgins a forged enrollment letter from his pocket. I had to act fast. Remembering the key, I slipped it from my pocket and let it fall to the floor near Ms. Higgins's purse. As I bent to pick it up, I whispered, "Check the basement." David saw me and quickly intervened, steering me toward the kitchen. "Let's get you some water, Mum." But Ms. Higgins had heard me. She glanced at the key and then toward the basement door. As David filled a glass at the sink, I saw Ms. Higgins subtly slide the key into her bag. David turned back, his eyes narrowing at my faint smile. He knew I'd done something, but he couldn't prove it. Just then, His phone buzzed with a text, and his face paled as he read it. "I have to take this," he said, stepping outside. Ms. Higgins stood up, her expression unreadable. "I think I'd like to see the basement now," she said to me quietly. I led Ms. Higgins to the basement door, my hands trembling with hope. David was outside on the phone, his voice raised in argument, something about a missed payment. This was my chance to show her the bloody sweater and the other evidence. But as I opened the door, the basement light was out, and David had locked the circuit box after my last visit. Ms. Higgins used her phone flashlight, and we descended slowly. I pointed to the boxes where I'd found the sweater, but they were gone. David must have moved them while I was outside. If this failed, Ms. Higgins might side with David, ending my search for Lily. I frantically searched the shelves, finding nothing. Ms. Higgins watched me, her doubt growing. Then I remembered the loose floorboard. I knelt, my knees cracking, and pried it up. The space was empty except for a single folded paper. It was a receipt for a storage unit across town, dated yesterday. Ms. Higgins took it, her brow furrowed. "What is this?" she asked. Before I could explain, David burst into the basement, his face flushed. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Ms. Higgins held up the receipt. "Care to explain this, Mr. Evans?" David's composure cracked. "It's for old furniture," he snapped, snatching the paper. But Ms. Higgins didn't back down. "I'd like to see this storage unit," she said firmly. David's phone buzzed again, and he glared at me. "This is your doing," he whispered. He turned to Ms. Higgins, forcing calm. "Of course, we can go tomorrow." But as we climbed the stairs, I saw David text someone quickly. "Need clean-up at Unit 4B, now." Back in the living room, Ms. Higgins arranged to meet David at the storage facility the next morning at 10. She left, giving me a reassuring nod, but I knew David would try to erase any evidence before then. I had to get to that unit tonight, but David had hidden my car keys and wallet. I had to find another way to the storage unit and see what was inside. The risk was immense. If David caught me, he might have me committed on the spot. He paced the room, muttering about handling things, then announced he was going out for a while. Before leaving, he locked me in my bedroom, saying it was for my safety. I heard the click of the lock and felt a wave of panic. The window was my only way out, but it was on the second floor. I tied bed sheets together, my arthritic fingers fumbling, and lowered myself slowly. The drop jarred my ankles, but I landed in the bushes. Now I had to walk to the storage unit. It was miles away, and my joints ached already. I started down the dark street, clutching the receipt copy I'd sneaked from Ms. Higgins's notepad. The pressure mounted with every car that passed. Any could be David returning. After an hour, I reached a bus stop and used loose change to ride toward the industrial area. The unit was in a poorly lit facility, and I found 4B easily. The lock was cut, hanging open. I pushed the door aside, and the smell hit me. Stale air and something metallic. Inside, I saw stacked boxes and a small cot with a stained blanket. On a shelf, I found Lily's backpack and a folder of documents. But as I reached for them, a shadow fell across the doorway. David stood there, holding a new lock. "I knew you'd come here, Mum," he said, his voice cold. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I backed away from David, my heart hammering against my ribs. The storage unit felt like a cage, with only one exit blocked by him. I needed to get past him and run to the office for help, but my legs were weak from the walk. David advanced slowly, his eyes fixed on the folder in my hand. "Give that to me," he demanded. Losing this evidence meant risking Lily's safety. I couldn't let him destroy it. I clutched it tighter, scanning for anything to use as a weapon. The unit was bare except for boxes and the cot. David sighed, pretending patience. "Mum, you're not well. Let me take you home." But I saw the anger in his clenched fists. I remembered the key in my pocket, the one from the basement, and wondered if it fit something here. As David reached for me, I ducked under his arm and shoved a box toward him. It toppled, spilling old clothes and toys. Among them, I spotted a small, locked metal box. The key slid in perfectly and it clicked open. Inside were bank statements showing large withdrawals and a life insurance policy for Lily. David froze, his face pale. "You don't understand," he whispered. But I did. He was planning something terrible for money. Just then, headlights flashed outside and a car pulled up. Ms. Higgins stepped out, followed by a police officer. David's expression turned to panic. "I called them from the bus," I said, my voice steady. Ms. Higgins approached, her eyes on the documents. But as the officer started asking questions, David pointed at me. "She's confused. She doesn't know what she's doing." The officer glanced between us, unsure. Then, from the car, a small figure emerged, Lily, looking thin and scared, holding Ms. Higgins's hand. My breath caught. David had hidden her here. But how did she get with them? Lily ran to me, burying her face in my coat. "Grandma? He said you were gone," she sobbed. David stared, his plan unraveling. The officer stepped forward, hand on his radio. "We need to sort this out downtown," he said. But as he reached for David, David bolted past him, sprinting into the night. The officer gave chase, and Ms. Higgins comforted Lily. I held my granddaughter close, feeling her tremble. We were safe for now, but David was still out there, and I knew he wouldn't give up easily. The police took Lily and me to the station while they searched for David. I held her hand tightly in the back of the patrol car, feeling her small fingers cling to mine. At the station, a kind female officer brought us blankets and hot tea. Lily whispered that David had kept her in the storage unit, telling her I was too sick to care for her. She said a man in a blue car brought food sometimes. I needed to give a formal statement to ensure David couldn't come near us again, but my mind was foggy with exhaustion. The clock on the wall showed it was past midnight. If I didn't speak clearly, they might delay pressing charges. An officer named Detective Miller sat with us, his voice gentle. I recounted finding the sweater, the key, and the insurance policy. Lily nodded, confirming my words. But when he asked about the man in the blue car, she clammed up, scared. The detective promised protection, but I knew David had resources. He'd planned this carefully. Just as we finished, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have involved the police. She's not safe." My blood ran cold. I showed the detective, but he said it was likely a bluff. Yet, when I looked at Lily, her face had gone pale. She pointed to the window behind me. Outside, across the street, a man in a dark hoodie stood under a street lamp, watching the station. He turned and walked away, but not before I saw the familiar hitch in his step. It was David's friend, Mark, who'd helped him with his plumbing business. The detective sent an officer to check, but the man was gone. We were moved to a safe room, but the fear lingered. David wasn't just hiding. He was sending a message. The police arranged for us to stay at a women's shelter for the night. Lily fell asleep on a narrow cot, clutching the stuffed rabbit an officer had given her. I sat awake, listening to the sounds of the city outside. I needed to secure legal custody of Lily immediately, before David could use his parental rights to take her back. But I had little money for a lawyer. and the courts moved slowly. The shelter manager, a weary woman named Brenda, gave me a list of low-cost legal services. My goal felt overwhelming. If I failed, David might snatch Lily from school or a playground. At dawn, I called my old friend, Martha, a retired paralegal. She agreed to meet me at the courthouse later to help file an emergency petition. But when I checked my bag, my wallet was missing, my ID, my credit card, everything gone. I must have dropped it during the escape from David's house. Without ID, I couldn't file papers or access my bank account. Pressure mounted as I imagined David using this delay. Brenda lent me bus fare, and Martha met me outside the courthouse. She'd brought a copy of my passport from her files. We'd travelled together years ago. "We need to move fast," she said, guiding me inside. The clerk was helpful, but as we filled out forms, my phone rang. It was David's number. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened. "Mum, drop this. I'll give you money to leave town. Otherwise, I'll tell them you're unstable, that you hurt Lily yourself." His threat was clear, but it gave me an idea. I saved the message. It was evidence of his manipulation. As we left the courthouse, I saw Mark's blue car parked down the street. He was watching us, talking on his phone. Martha squeezed my arm. "Let's go," she said, pulling me toward a taxi. But I knew David's network was wider than I'd thought. With the custody petition filed, Martha took Lily and me to her apartment. It was small but safe, on the third floor with a good lock. Lily finally smiled, eating toast at Martha's kitchen table. I needed to gather more evidence against David to ensure the police took his threats seriously. The life insurance policy and the bloody sweater were key, but they were still in police evidence. I called Detective Miller, but he said the case was under review and advised me to wait. Waiting wasn't an option. David could act any time. I remembered the bank statements from the metal box, large withdrawals from Lily's college fund. If I could prove he was stealing from her, it would strengthen my case. But accessing those records required a court order or his permission. Martha suggested we visit the bank and explain the situation. The local branch manager, Mr. Evans, knew me from years of deposits. We went that afternoon, Lily holding my hand tightly. Mr. Evans listened sympathetically, but said he couldn't release records without legal documentation. As we turned to leave, I saw David's business partner, Mark, enter the bank. He avoided my eyes and went to a teller. I lingered near the door, pretending to fix Lily's coat. Mark withdrew a large sum of cash from what looked like David's account. He shoved it into an envelope and hurried out. I followed him to the parking lot, but he drove off quickly. Back inside, Mr. Evans approached me, looking uneasy. "I shouldn't say this," he whispered, "but that man has been making regular withdrawals for your son. The account is nearly empty." My heart sank. David was liquidating everything. As we left, I noticed a bank security camera pointed at the parking lot. If I could get that footage, it might show Mark's transactions. But how? Martha had an idea. Her nephew worked in bank security. She called him, and he agreed to help if we got a subpoena. The pieces were coming together, but time was running out. That evening, my phone buzzed with an alert. Someone had tried to access my online banking. David was getting desperate. I changed all my passwords and put a freeze on my credit. But the attempt shook me. David knew my personal details, my mother's maiden name, my first pet, everything. I had to protect what little I had left for Lily. Martha helped me set up a new account at a different bank, but transferring funds would take days. Meanwhile, the custody hearing was scheduled for next week, and I needed to prove I could provide a stable home. My small pension wasn't much, but it was enough for rent on a modest apartment. We went to view a place near Martha's, but the landlord required a deposit and first month's rent up front. I didn't have that much cash. The pressure was immense. If I couldn't secure housing, the court might place Lily in foster care temporarily. I decided to sell my late husband's gold watch, the only thing of value I'd kept. A pawn shop offered me a fraction of its worth, but it was enough for the deposit. As I signed the lease, my phone rang. It was Detective Miller. "We found the blue car," he said. "It's registered to Mark Higgins. We're bringing him in for questioning." Hope flickered. If Mark talked, he could lead them to David. But later that day, Miller called back. Mark had denied everything, claiming he was just helping a friend move some items. Without harder evidence, they had to release him. I felt defeated. But then I remembered the storage unit receipt. What if there were more units? Martha and I drove to the storage facility, pretending to be interested renters. The manager showed us around, and I casually asked about Unit 4B. He said it was rented under a company name, David's plumbing business. But then he mentioned another unit, 7C, rented last week by the same company. My breath caught. We waited until he was distracted. Then I slipped away to check 7C. The lock was new, but through a crack in the door, I saw stacks of file boxes and a small suitcase. Lily's, with her name on it. I took a picture with my phone, but as I did, I heard footsteps behind me. The manager stood there, frowning. "You can't be back here," he said. Then his eyes widened. He was looking past me. I turned and saw David standing at the end of the corridor, holding a key. He smiled slowly. "Hello, Mum." David walked toward us, his expression calm, but his eyes dangerous. The manager stammered an apology and retreated, leaving me alone in the hallway. I backed against the unit door, my phone still in my hand with the photo of Lily's suitcase. David stopped a few feet away. "I see you're still interfering," he said softly. I needed to get away and call the police, but my phone had no signal in the concrete building. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys, not for the storage unit, but for a car. "Get in the car, Mum. We're going for a drive." I knew if I went with him, I might not come back. I thought of Lily, safe with Martha, and knew I had to stall. "Why, David? Why are you doing this?" I asked, buying time. He sighed, as if explaining to a child. "The business is failing. I have debts. Lily's insurance policy was the way out." His confession hung in the air. I edged toward the fire alarm on the wall, hoping it might bring help. David saw my glance and laughed. "It's disconnected for renovations," he said. He stepped closer, grabbing my arm. His grip was firm, but I didn't struggle. Instead, I let my phone fall to the floor, pretending to stumble. As I bent to pick it up, I pressed the emergency call button I'd preset. It would dial Detective Miller. I stood up, speaking loudly. "You're not taking me anywhere, David. The police know everything." He tightened his hold, but then we heard sirens in the distance, growing closer. David's confidence wavered. He released my arm and backed away. "This isn't over," he hissed, then turned and ran out the back exit. I sank against the wall, trembling. The police arrived minutes later, and I showed them the photo and told them what David had said. They put out an alert for his car. Back at Martha's, I hugged Lily tightly. We were safe for now, but David was still free, and he knew where we were. I looked at my granddaughter's trusting face and knew I couldn't let my guard down. Not yet. The flower delivery arrived at Martha's apartment the next morning, a bouquet of white lilies with no card. Martha took one look and shoved them in the trash. "He's telling you he knows where we are," she said, her voice tight. I held Lily close, her small body trembling against mine. We couldn't stay here anymore. David was circling, and Martha's safety was now compromised too. I needed to find us a new, temporary place to hide until the custody hearing, somewhere David wouldn't think to look. My limited funds were a problem. Most motels required a credit card, which David could trace. I remembered an old, cash-only motor lodge on the edge of town where my husband and I had stayed decades ago. It was run down, but it would do. Moving again took a heavy toll. My arthritis flared with each stress, and Lily was scared of every strange noise. We packed our few things quickly. As we loaded Martha's car, a black sedan drove slowly past the building. It didn't stop, but the driver's face was obscured by a cap and sunglasses. My stomach knotted. We drove in silence, Lily clutching her rabbit in the back seat. At the motor lodge, I paid for a week in cash under a false name. The room was damp and smelled of mildew, but the locks were solid. I put Lily down for a nap, then sat by the window, watching the parking lot. Every car that passed made my heart jump. Later, I checked the local news on my phone. There was a brief piece about a manhunt for David, but no leads. Then an email popped up from an unknown address. It was a scanned photo of Lily's birth certificate with a handwritten note. A mother should have this, for her safety. It was signed with a single initial, M. Mark. Was he helping now? Or was this another one of David's tricks? I showed Martha, who frowned. "This feels like a warning," she whispered. Just then, Lily cried out in her sleep. I went to her and found her clutching her stuffed rabbit tightly. Something was bulging oddly in its seam. I carefully unstitched a small section and pulled out a tiny silver electronic device, a tracking chip. David had known where we were all along. I stared at the tracking chip in my palm, my blood running cold. All this time, David had been listening, knowing our every move. I showed it to Martha, whose face went pale. We had to assume he knew we were at the motor lodge now. We needed to leave immediately, but it was already dark, and Lily was exhausted. I made a decision. We would stay one night, but I would disable the chip and place it on a departing truck in the morning. For now, I wrapped it in aluminum foil from our sandwich to block the signal. I aimed to buy us a few hours of silence. It meant another sleepless night, jumping at every sound from the parking lot. Martha slept fitfully on the other bed, while I sat in a chair by the door, a heavy flashlight in my lap. The pressure was immense. If David arrived tonight, we had little defense. Around 3 a.m., I heard a car pull in slowly. I peered through the blinds. It was the black sedan again. It parked at the far end of the lot, its lights off. No one got out. I woke Martha silently and pointed. We gathered our things, ready to flee out the back window if necessary. The car sat there for nearly an hour, then finally started and drove away. My shoulders slumped with relief, but the fear didn't leave. In the morning, I slipped outside at dawn and stuck the foil-wrapped chip under the bumper of a lumbering delivery truck headed for the highway. Let David follow that. Back in the room, I checked my email. There was another message from the mysterious M. It contained a scanned document, a life insurance application for Lily, taken out by David just a month ago, with himself as the sole beneficiary. The amount was staggering. It was more proof, but it also meant David's plan was still in motion. He needed Lily to be gone. I had to get this to Detective Miller today. We packed the car and checked out. As we pulled onto the main road, I saw the black sedan again, parked at a gas station across the street. The driver was on the phone, watching us. He wasn't following the truck. He knew. The black sedan stayed several cars behind us as Martha drove toward the police station. I clutched the printed insurance application, my proof. I needed to get this evidence to Detective Miller and demand immediate action. But if David's accomplice was following us, he might try to intercept us before we arrived. Martha took a sudden turn into a busy shopping plaza, weaving through the parking lot to lose him. It worked. When we merged back onto the road, the sedan was gone. At the station, Detective Miller was in a meeting, so we waited in the lobby. Lily coloured quietly, but her hands were shaking. The wait felt eternal. Every minute gave David more time to disappear or plot his next move. Finally, Miller emerged and took us to his desk. I handed him the insurance document. He scanned it, his expression grim. "This is serious," he admitted. "We'll put out a higher priority alert." But then he added, "Without a body or a clear crime, it's still largely a custodial issue." The frustration was a physical ache. I needed to make him see the immediacy of the threat. Just then, his phone rang. He listened, then looked at me, his face carefully neutral. "They found David's car," he said. "Abandoned near the bus station. His phone was inside. Smashed." It felt like a dead end. David was smarter than that. He wanted us to think he'd fled the city, but I knew he wouldn't leave without that insurance money. He was still here, hiding in plain sight. As we left the station, feeling defeated, my phone buzzed. It was a text from David's number. "You win. I'm done. I just want to see Lily one last time to say goodbye. Meet me at the old playground on Elm Saint in 1 hour. Come alone." My breath caught. It was a trap. I was sure of it. But what if he was desperate? What if he really did have a change of heart? I looked at Lily. She missed her dad, despite everything. The pressure to make the right choice was crushing. Martha read the text over my shoulder. "Don't you dare," she warned. But I was already thinking. I wouldn't bring Lily. But I would go. And I wouldn't be alone. I called Detective Miller from a payphone near the playground. I told him about the text and my plan to meet David, but only as a stall, so the police could apprehend him. Miller was reluctant, but agreed to have officers covertly surround the area. I aimed to be the bait to end this, but it meant walking into a potential confrontation with a man who had nothing left to lose. Martha took Lily to a secure location, the home of another friend, one David had never met. I drove to the playground alone, my heart a drum in my chest. The old swings creaked in the wind. I sat on a bench, waiting. Right on time, David emerged from behind the restroom building. He looked haggard, his clothes rumpled. He sat next to me, not too close. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice rough. "She's safe," I said. "It's over, David." He shook his head, a bitter smile on his face. "It's never over. The people I owe money to, they don't forgive debts." So that was it. This was about gambling, or some other failure he'd hidden. He was being pressured by loan sharks. He started to plead, "Just let me see her, Mum. One last time. Then I'll go away forever." I held firm. "The police have the insurance document, David. They know everything." His face changed then, the desperation turning to cold anger. "You shouldn't have done that." He stood up abruptly. This was the signal. I expected the police to move in, but nothing happened. David looked around, sensing the trap. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in. "You come with me, then," he hissed. Just then, a child's laughter echoed from the street. We both turned. It was a family walking by, but the sound had broken his concentration. I yanked my arm free and stood, backing away. "The police are here, David. It's finished?" He laughed, a hollow sound. "Are they?" He pointed to a utility van parked down the street. My friend Mark is in that van. He's jamming their radios. They can't hear you, and they can't call for backup. He took a step toward me. I was alone. David advanced, and I backed toward the jungle gym, my mind racing. The police were here, but isolated, unable to coordinate. I had to get to Detective Miller's car, which I'd spotted parked behind the hedge. David saw my glance and smirked. He can't help you. I knew if he got me into that van, I'd never be seen again. My only chance was to cause a scene, to break the jamming by creating chaos. I turned and shouted as loud as my old lungs would allow. Fire! Fire! Help! I wasn't near any buildings, but the word carries a unique panic. Lights went on in houses across the street. A man came out onto his porch. David froze, startled by the sudden attention. In that moment, I saw Miller and another officer burst from their car, running toward us. The jamming might have blocked their comms, but they could see what was happening. David turned to run, but the officer tackled him to the ground. I stood, gasping, as they cuffed him. He was screaming, not at the officers, but at me. You've killed us both. They'll come for her now. You don't understand. He was dragged away, still yelling about the people he owed. Detective Miller came to me, his hand on my shoulder. It's over, he said. But as I watched the squad car pull away, I knew it wasn't. David's final warning echoed in my ears. His debts were still out there, and he had tied them to Lily. We were safe from him, but was anyone ever truly safe from a ghost of a debt? I got into my car, my hands finally still. I had my granddaughter back. The legal battle for permanent custody was ahead, but the immediate monster was captured. I drove to Martha's friend's house to get Lily. When I walked in, she ran to me and hugged my legs tightly. I knelt down and held her, feeling the solid weight of her in my arms. We would go home, whatever that was now, and we would be careful. But for this moment, we were together. The quiet felt earned, but fragile. A man in a cheap suit appeared on Martha's doorstep this morning, holding a folder and a fake smile. He introduced himself as Mr. Grossman, representing a collection agency for David's outstanding debts. He claimed that since David had used Lily's name as collateral, they had a lien on her future assets, including any insurance policies. I had until the end of the week to settle the debt or face legal recovery actions. I stood my ground in the doorway, my body blocking his view of Lily inside. I wanted to get rid of him and protect Lily from these vultures, but I knew nothing about Leon law, and his confidence scared me. If I failed, these people could drag us into court, draining my limited savings and destabilizing Lily's fragile sense of security. Mr. Grossman leaned in, his breath smelling of mint and cigarettes. We can make this easy, or we can make it very hard, he said softly. I told him to leave all correspondence with my lawyer, though I didn't have one yet. As he handed me a business card, his sleeve rode up, and I saw a familiar tattoo, a coiled snake. David's friend Mark had the same tattoo on his wrist. This wasn't just a random agency. Mark was involved. I shut the door and locked it, my hands trembling. Martha was at the store, and I was alone with Lily. I called Detective Miller, but he was out of the office until afternoon. The pressure was immediate. These people knew where we lived. I needed to find proof that this debt claim was fraudulent. I remembered the bank statements from the storage unit. I dug them out and spread them on the kitchen table. Among the withdrawals, I found a series of payments to a company called Grossman Holdings. It was the same name on the business card. This was a shell company David and Mark used to funnel money. Then, as Lily coloured at the table, She pointed to a number on the statement, and everything changed. "That's Daddy's lucky number?" she said. It was a recurring payment amount, $500. She said he always said it was for the snake man. My blood ran cold. This was all connected. Just then, the doorbell rang again. I peered through the peephole. It was Mr. Grossman, but he wasn't alone. Mark stood behind him, staring directly at the door. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called 911 and reported 2 men trespassing and making threats. I could hear them arguing outside before they quickly left. The police came, took my statement, and said they'd patrol the area. But I knew it wasn't over. I needed to get a restraining order and a lawyer immediately to shield Lily from these claims. Martha returned, and we spent the afternoon calling legal aid services. The expenses were already mounting. The stress was making my blood pressure spike, and Lily had nightmares again. We found a pro bono lawyer through a senior advocacy group, a woman named Elena Torres. She agreed to meet us first thing tomorrow, but that night, an envelope was slid under Martha's door. It contained a photocopy of a promissory note with David's signature, supposedly agreeing to use Lily's insurance policy as loan security. The note demanded a payment of $50,000 within 72 hours, or they would pursue all available remedies. The pressure was immense. If this note was somehow valid, they could lien any settlement or inheritance Lily might have. I couldn't sleep, going over every document I had. Around 2 a.m., I remembered something David said years ago about never signing anything without reading it twice. I got out the life insurance application I'd emailed to myself. Comparing the signatures, the one on the promissory note was sloppier, rushed. It might be a forgery. This was a sudden chance, a possible way to fight back. I took pictures and sent them to Elena. In the morning, she called back, her voice eager. "This is good," she said. "The signature doesn't match his driver's license on file. We can challenge this." But as we were celebrating this small victory, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Cute kid. She looks like she enjoys the playground." Attached was a photo of Lily from yesterday, taken from across the street. They were still watching us, and now they were threatening her directly. The photo sent a chill down my spine. They weren't just after money. They were threatening my granddaughter. I needed to find out who was sending these texts and stop them, but my old phone couldn't trace the number. Eleanor advised us to move to a safer location until the restraining order was processed. Martha had a cousin with a vacant rental unit a town over, and we packed hastily. It meant another disruption for Lily, who cried as we left Martha's familiar apartment. As we loaded the car, I noticed a small black device stuck to the underside of the rear bumper, another tracker. They were always one step ahead. I ripped it off and threw it in a storm drain. The drive was tense, with me constantly checking the mirrors. At the new apartment, it felt sterile and empty. While setting up, I decided to call the phone company to see if they could block the number, but I needed an account PIN I didn't have. The pressure was making me feel paranoid. Every noise made me jump. Later that evening, I went to take out the trash and saw a neighbor, an elderly man named Walter, struggling with his grocery bags. I helped him, and we chatted briefly. He mentioned he was a retired phone company technician. This was an unexpected help, a potential ally. I hesitated, but then told him about the harassing texts. He offered to look at my phone settings. Inside his apartment, he showed me how to enable call blocking and suggested I report the number to the FCC. As I was leaving, I noticed a framed photo on his shelf. It was of Walter with a much younger man. The younger man had a coiled snake tattoo on his forearm. It was Mark. Walter saw me looking, and his friendly demeanor vanished. "You should go now," he said firmly. I hurried out, my heart pounding. Back in my apartment, I locked the door. Walter was connected to Mark. He knew where we were now. Just then, a rock came through the living room window, shattering glass onto the floor. A note was tied to it. Last warning. The broken window felt like a physical violation. Lily screamed, and I pulled her away from the glass. I called the police and Elena, my voice shaking. We couldn't stay here. It was compromised. The police came, took a report, and advised us to leave for the night. Elena arranged for a room at a domestic violence shelter. It was secure, but humiliating to need such a place. I intended to get through the night and then confront this head-on with legal action, but I was running out of energy and resources. It cost Lily her sense of safety. She clung to me, too scared to sleep. At the shelter, I lay awake, thinking about Walter. How was he involved? Was he Mark's father? Uncle? I needed to find the connection to break their network. In the morning, I called Detective Miller and told him about Walter. He said he'd look into it, but reminded me that without evidence of a crime, it was hard to act. The pressure was mounting. These people were persistent and knew how to intimidate without crossing clear legal lines. Elena met us at the shelter with good news. The judge had granted a temporary restraining order against Mark and John Doe associates based on the threats and the broken window, but she warned that serving them would be tricky if we didn't know where they were. We decided to return to Martha's with a security system Elena helped arrange. As we drove back, I kept checking for followers. Suddenly, a blue car, Mark's car, pulled up beside us at a red light. Mark rolled down his window and yelled, "You can't hide forever!" Then he sped off. My hands were slick on the wheel. But then my phone rang. It was Walter. His voice was different, shaky. "I'm sorry," he said. "Mark is my nephew. He's in deep with some bad people from his gambling. I didn't want any part of this, but he threatened me too." He offered to testify against Mark if it would keep him safe. This was a turning point, an insider turning. I told him to meet me at the police station with Elena present. But as we parked near the station, I saw Mark's car parked a block away. He was watching us, and he saw Walter get out of his car and walk toward us. Mark started running toward Walter, his face contorted with rage. Mark grabbed Walter's arm, shouting, "You traitor!" I stepped between them, my body shielding Walter. "It's over, Mark," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Elena was already inside the station, and she came out with Detective Miller. Mark let go of Walter and backed away, but the police quickly surrounded him. He was arrested for violating the restraining order and making threats. Walter, pale and trembling, gave a statement about Mark's involvement in the fraudulent debt scheme and the intimidation tactics. With his testimony, the case against Mark strengthened, and the claims against Lily's insurance were put on hold. I hoped to finally secure a peaceful life for Lily, but the legal process was slow, and David's trial was still pending. My health had suffered. I was exhausted, and the doctor warned me to reduce stress. A few days later, we moved into a small ground-floor apartment I rented with my pension. It had a good security system, and Martha lived nearby. Lily started at a new school, and she seemed to be adjusting, though she still asked about her dad sometimes. I had permanent custody now, but it was emotionally draining. One afternoon, I received a letter from David. He was in jail, awaiting trial. He wrote that he was sorry, and that the life insurance was a desperate gamble to pay off loan sharks who threatened to hurt Lily if he didn't. He named the people, a local gambling ring, and said he'd testify against them in exchange for a reduced sentence. Detective Miller confirmed they were investigating the ring. It was a small relief, but it didn't erase the betrayal. As I read the letter, Lily was playing in the living room, building a tower with blocks. She looked up and smiled at me. "I love you, Grandma," she said. I folded the letter and put it away. The immediate threats were gone, but the scars remained. We had each other, and that was enough for now. But I knew the court proceedings would drag on, and I wondered if David's remorse was real or just another manipulation. For today, though, I focused on Lily's smile and the quiet rhythm of our new life. The future was uncertain, but we were safe. A plain envelope arrived in my mailbox this morning, no return address. Inside was a single photo of Lily walking to school with Martha, taken from a car across the street. Written on the back were the words, "Testimony has consequences." My hands shook as I held it. David's trial starts in 3 days, and his testimony against the gambling ring is the key. I needed to ensure our safety until then, but I felt exposed in our new apartment. I called Detective Miller immediately. He said he'd increase patrols, but resources were tight. Lily's peace was shattered. She had finally stopped having nightmares. And now this. Martha offered to stay with us, but I didn't want to drag her deeper into this. Later, I checked the apartment's security cameras I'd installed. The footage showed a dark sedan driving slowly past the house at the exact time the photo was taken. I couldn't make out the license plate, but the car looked familiar. I spent the afternoon reviewing old evidence from David's case, looking for any connection to the sedan. In a folder of bank statements, I found a receipt for a car rental, the same make and model as the sedan, rented to a company linked to Mark's associates. This was their doing. They were trying to scare us into silence. As I was about to call Miller back, my phone rang. It was David's lawyer, asking if I would testify about the threats to Lily to strengthen the case. I agreed, but my stomach tightened. Putting Lily in the spotlight felt dangerous. That evening, while making dinner, I heard a knock on the door. I peered through the peephole and saw a woman I didn't recognize holding a bouquet. "Delivery for Lily," she said. I didn't open the door, but through the window, I saw her get into the dark sedan and drive away. The flowers were Lily's again, a twisted message. I called Martha to come over, and we decided to pack a bag in case we needed to leave quickly. As I tucked Lily into bed, she asked, "Grandma, are the bad people coming back?" I hugged her tight, promising they wouldn't. But later, checking the camera feed one more time, I saw the sedan parked down the street, its engine off. Someone was sitting inside, watching. The sedan was still there at dawn. I called Detective Miller, and he sent a car to check, but it drove away before they arrived. With the trial 2 days away, I needed to find a way to stop these threats permanently. I aimed to gather enough evidence to link the sedan directly to the gambling ring, but I had no legal authority to investigate. Martha suggested we visit the rental company with the receipt, posing as concerned citizens reporting a suspicious vehicle. It took time and energy I didn't have. My arthritis was flaring up from stress. At the rental office, the clerk was hesitant until I mentioned it was for a police matter. He confirmed the car was rented to a Grossman Holdings, the same name from the debt scheme. He gave me the rental agreement copy, which had a signature, illegible, but the printed name was M. Higgins, Mark. This connected him directly to the intimidation. I felt a surge of hope. This could help the prosecution. But as we left, I saw the sedan parked a block away, and Mark was leaning against it, smirking. He didn't approach, but his presence was a clear warning. Back home, I emailed the rental agreement to Eleanor and Detective Miller. Miller called back, saying they could use it to add charges against Mark. The pressure eased slightly, but that evening, our home phone rang. No one spoke, but I heard breathing, then a child's laughter. a recording of Lily from the playground. They were tapping our lines. I unplugged the phone, my hands trembling. Lily was colouring at the table, unaware. I knew we couldn't stay here another night. Martha helped me pack, and we moved to a hotel under a false name. As we settled in, I checked the news on my phone. There was a brief update. David's trial had been moved up to tomorrow. My breath caught. We had to be in court at 9 a.m. I looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully, and knew I had to face whatever came next. The courtroom was cold and crowded. I sat with Lily in the front row, holding her hand. David was brought in, wearing an orange jumpsuit, and he barely glanced at us. I just wanted to get through the day without any incidents, but I kept scanning the room for familiar faces. It was emotionally draining. Every time David spoke, I remembered the betrayal. The prosecutor called me to the stand first. I testified about finding the bloody sweater, the insurance policy, and the recent threats. When I mentioned the photo and the sedan, David's lawyer objected, but the judge allowed it. Under cross-examination, David's lawyer tried to paint me as a confused old woman, but I held firm. During a recess, I went to the restroom and found a note taped to the mirror. "Stop talking, or else." It was written in the same handwriting as the photo. My heart raced. Someone was inside the courthouse. I showed it to a bailiff, who alerted security. The pressure was immense. I felt watched every second. When the trial resumed, David took the stand. He confessed to the insurance scheme and named 2 men from the gambling ring who had pressured him. He looked at me then, his eyes pleading for forgiveness, but I turned away. As the session ended, the judge set the sentencing for next week. We were escorted out by police, and as we reached the car, I saw Mark in the parking lot talking to a man in a suit. They didn't approach, but Mark made a cutting motion across his throat. Lily saw it and started crying. I drove us back to the hotel, feeling exhausted. That night, I received a call from Detective Miller. They had arrested Mark and the 2 men David named, based on his testimony and my evidence. He said the ring was dismantled and the threats should stop. I sighed with relief, but as I hung up, I noticed Lily's stuffed rabbit on the floor. Its ear was torn, and something silver glinted inside. Another tracking chip. They had planted it on her today. I stared at the tracking chip, my relief shattered. They had access to Lily even in court. I needed to remove it and ensure no more were hidden, but I also had to report this immediately. It was late, so I called Detective Miller's emergency line. He said he'd send someone to collect it as evidence. Lily's sense of security was lost. She woke up and saw me with the rabbit, and she started sobbing, thinking I was taking it away. I calmed her down and promised to fix it. Martha came over to stay with us at the hotel. We spent the next hour checking all of Lily's belongings and our bags for more devices. We found a second chip sewn into the lining of my coat. They had been tracking us all along. The pressure was overwhelming. I thought it was over, but it wasn't. In the morning, Miller confirmed the chips were similar to ones used by private investigators, likely hired by the ring. With Mark in custody, he suspected an associate was still active. I decided to take proactive steps. I changed our phone numbers, closed old bank accounts, and set up a post office box for all mail. I also enrolled Lily in a new school under a different last name, with the school's cooperation. The process was draining, but necessary. A few days later, David was sentenced to 10 years in prison for fraud and conspiracy. I didn't attend the sentencing. I heard it from Elena. She said he asked about Lily, but I had no intention of letting him see her. As weeks passed, no new threats emerged. Lily began to smile more, and we settled into a routine. I started gardening on our small balcony, something I hadn't done in years. One afternoon, while watering plants, I found a folded note tucked under a pot. It read, "He's not the only one who remembers." My blood ran cold. I showed it to Miller, but he said without more, there was little to do. I knew then that while the major players were gone, the fear might never fully leave. But I refused to let it control us. I ripped up the note and threw it away. That night, I read Lily a bedtime story, and she fell asleep holding my hand. I watched her breathe, steady and calm, and vowed to cherish these quiet moments. The first snow of the season fell today, dusting the balcony railing white. Lily pressed her nose against the window, giggling as she watched the flakes dance. I made hot cocoa, and we sat together on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket. The move to a new town last month was hard, but worth it. Here, no one knows our past, and Lily has made a friend at school. What I want now is simple: to build a peaceful life for us, one day at a time. The toll of the past year is etched in my memory, the sleepless nights, the constant vigilance. But I'm learning to let go. I've started attending a senior yoga class, and the gentle stretches ease my arthritis. Martha visits often, and we play cards while Lily draws. Sometimes I think of David in his cell, and a pang of sadness hits me. But I don't dwell on it. He made his choices. Last week, I received a letter from the court. The remaining associates of the gambling ring pleaded guilty, and the case is closed. I filed the letter away without reading it again. Today, Lily brought home a drawing from school, a picture of her and me holding hands under a rainbow. She pointed to it and said, "This is us, Grandma. Always." I framed it and hung it in the kitchen. As I wash the cocoa mugs, I look out at the snow-covered street. It's quiet, just the hum of the heater and Lily's soft singing from her room. There are no more envelopes, no more threats. The revenge I sought came through the law, and the peace I craved came from letting go. I smile, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. We have each other, and that's enough. The future is ours to shape, and for the first time in a long while, I'm not afraid.